spooky friends. Welcome to another episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. My name is John, and I'm here to say I have taken care of the haunted podcast issues. Hopefully, we had on our last episode of Haunted Galena. Well, at least for now. So hopefully there are no more issues from Spectre. I think you can figure out what to do with it. I will clever. Deal with it. And I'm going to say thanks to my co-hosts Brooke and Megan for being pros and taking over. Did you miss me?
We did. We did.
Of course. We cried the whole time you were gone, John.
We really did.
I thought it was really kind of funny that I was texting and you're trying to do things and like,
oh yeah, Brooke is like, oh.
Anyway,
like this is what John thinks.
So, by the way, I just wanted to really quickly say this. One of the things we always forget: this might be your first time listening to us. Okay, and if that's true, what I wanted to do is say, like, what do we talk about? Like, what are you guys really doing? So, first of all, you need to listen to past episodes, right? Rate us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. 5 stars, please. And the reason we do this podcast is because we love the paranormal and we like to have fun with it and tell it in our own unique way. Brooke or Megan, do you have anything to add to maybe a first-time listener who's listening to this and going, hey, what's this all about?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say if you're interested in cryptids, in hauntings, in alien abductions, anything of that sort, or the best places to visit if you're interested in the paranormal around the Midwest, it's a good place. It's a good place to be. And yeah, like John said, we like to kind of have fun with it. You know, we don't really take things too seriously, but sometimes it's a little bit, we've been doing some historical episodes too, a little bit more a little bit more serious and informative too. So, anything like that.
Yeah. Megan, do you have anything to add to somebody listening for the first time?
Another thing we also like to do is discuss if we believe it or if we think it's true or, our different insights on it. So you can always follow along and let us know. You can email us at dairylandfrights@gmail.com and join us in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most fun parts of it because I think I listen to a lot of paranormal, supernatural related podcasts where everyone is just like very... I don't know, like kind of overly dramatic and like, oh, this definitely happened. This is all definitely true.
Yeah.
And I think that we kind of take a little bit more of an objective approach, like, well, maybe this is a hoax or maybe I think we're a little bit more skeptical, but still a good happy medium, I think.
Yeah, we're not the podcast that goes, and then the monster ate the brains of the... At least we
could be, but...
Yeah,
we
John.
could. Yeah, I could do spooky, creepy, scare you pee your pants voice. But, I'm like, yeah, okay. After a while, you're like, I get it. I'm supposed to be scared. But anyway, so let's get right to it. One of my favorite monsters or visitors, I should say. I don't know if it's a monster. I have a ton of family in Iowa, so I'm familiar with this.
Oh, nice.
But Brooke, why don't you tell us about a strange creature that terrified the Midwest, or terrified a Midwest town for a week. This time in the early 1900s.
Yes, I feel like a lot of our stories take place in this general time frame, but yeah, so this takes place in 1903. A very small town in Iowa was terrorized by a winged beast. This kind of sounds familiar. For 5 nights, leading to an old-fashioned mob being formed to drive the beast out of town, which is always fun. But was it all real, or was it an elaborate hoax created by some of the town's most prominent residents? We'll have to learn more, and then we'll discuss and see what you guys think and what we all think. But I think it's a pretty fun story, so we'll get right into it. A couple of the sources that I used were the Des Moines Register, the Daily Yonder, also Chad Lewis's YouTube channel called Supernatural Dares.
Oh, I know that one.
Do you? Yeah, that's awesome.
I do.
I just wanted to mention I did not purchase and read the book because I didn't really have time, but I think the vast majority of my information originally sourced from the book called The Van Meter Visitor: A True and Mysterious Encounter with the Unknown, which was written by Chad Lewis and Kevin Nelson and Noah Voss, which we will talk a little bit about because it's kind of fun. Again, we have a personal connection with Kevin Nelson because we all worked with him at one point, so that's kind of fun.
No, cool.
Yeah. So that is Wizard, if you've heard us talk about him in the past. That a really good book. I haven't read it, but I know that the vast majority of the information comes from that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want to start with a little bit of information about the town of Van Meter, Iowa. So this was in 1903. Van Meter was a small town founded in 1877 by a group of Dutch settlers. Van Meter is kind of part of the Des Moines metropolitan area. It's a little bit west of Des Moines. And it takes up an area of about 1.3 miles situated along the Raccoon River in Iowa. And according to census data, the estimate is that the population as of 1903 was only around 400 people. So it's a pretty small town. And the population had actually dropped about 12% compared to the previous census in 1890. So as of 2020, the most recent census, the population of the town has grown to about 1,500. So it has grown since then.
Yeah, quite a bit.
But it's kind of interesting that the population dropped between 1890 and 1900. That'll kind of play into when we talk about theories a little bit. We'll see. But also, this is just kind of a fun fact. This does not mean anything to me, but maybe it will to John. I think John's a baseball fan. We'll see. Baseball Hall of Famer Bob Feller is from Van Meter. He was a pitcher who played 18 seasons for the Cleveland Indians at the time. One of his nicknames was the Heater from Van Meter.
Nice.
They actually, it was just kind of fun. And they opened a museum in Van Meter in his honor in 1995, and he actually passed away in 2010 at the age of 92. So he lived a very long life. But I threw that in there for John. I thought it was kind of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I used to be a pitcher, but they didn't call me the Heater. You don't want to know what they called me. I wasn't very good. So anyway.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
Fun fact.
I love the Heater from Van Meter. That's a good nickname.
Yeah.
Right. So let's get into what happened in the fall of 1903. So the first night of these experiences that people had in the town was the night of September 29th, 2023. So on this night, not 2023. September 29th, 1903. I don't know why. Yeah.
Got a little crazy there.
Just happened,
this is just
that just happened? That's amazing.
It hasn't even happened yet.
Oh, that's right.
My bad.
Whoa, we can see into the future at Dairyland Frights.
Yeah. Well, maybe it will. We'll have to keep our ears open. But anyway, so on this night in 1903, a man named Eugene Griffith, he was a local businessman, and he was walking home to Van Meter very late at night after traveling for work during the day. So at the time that he was walking home, he had to walk through town to get to his home, and it was about 1 a.m. So around 1, as he passed through town, he saw a light on top of a building that was across the street from him. And he watched it. He was a little bit concerned because it's really late at night. At this time, it's just not considered a normal thing to do to be out super late at night. So, and he thought that it originally looked like someone had a lantern at the top of this building. So he was actually like concerned that a robber might be scoping out the local bank, because this is kind of it was either on top of the bank or like right next to the bank. So he was a little bit concerned. So he kind of stood there and watched to see what was going to happen. And as he watched, all of a sudden the light vanished and then reappeared across the street on top of an entirely different building.
No way.
Yeah, so he was very confused. He was like, what's going on? Thinking that maybe it's multiple people now, not understanding what was happening. He continued to watch, but the original light had vanished. So is now like across the street on a new building. And then at this point, he actually saw the light move like across the sky back to a building on the other side, like where it kind of originally was. And this time it didn't like disappear and reappear. He actually like saw it like basically jump across the building. And
okay.
Yeah, so at this point he's really freaked out. He doesn't understand what's going on. He continues to watch, and then he sees the light travel straight upwards into the sky, essentially vanishing into the night. And so he's just kind of like, what the hell? So he continues his journey home after he kind of like collects himself. And then the next day, Griffith is kind of out in town, like telling people about what happened to him during the previous night. Because again, at this point, he's not really thinking like this is something supernatural, even though it kind of seemed like leaning that way. Right. But he was still a little bit concerned about the fact that maybe someone was scoping out the bank. So he was kind of telling people about it. And it kind of brought a lot of uneasiness to the residents around this small town, because everyone kind of talked to everyone at this point. So, and no one really knew what was going on. So the second night, Dr. Alcott. So Dr. Alcott is the town doctor. He's really well respected, much like UG Griffith. They're very well known, prominent figures in the town. So Dr. Alcott was actually sleeping in his office that night, and he was kind of struggling to sleep at a certain point because a bright light shone through his window. Yeah. So that's interesting. So remembering what Griffith had told him from the previous night, he believed that this was like the same prowler. He was worried maybe like the guy was trying to break into his practice, and that he was trying to break into the building. So he grabbed his pistol and went downstairs. And instead, what he saw was a humanoid bat-like man with talons and a horn in the middle of his forehead hanging from the building. So he went outside and he saw this. And super freaked out. He was like looking at it, and then it seemed like the thing didn't really notice him, and then he took his pistol and he shot at it. Of course, as you do. And then the creature like turns and looks at him and kind of like blinds him with light, and he just kind of like I don't know, apparently wildly like shot 4 or 5 more times. Naturally. Just shooting, whatever. I
love Old Town.
Right? Just just shooting into the buildings, into the windows, whatever. So he fired a total of 5 times, I believe, and then the creature, according to him, let out a screech and then flew out into the night. He didn't seem to be physically affected by the bullets, but it freaked the creature out, so it flew away.
Oh, yeah. It would freak me out.
Right? And apparently the next morning, the police came to investigate the scene. They did find 5 shell casings. They didn't see any blood or anything like that. So now let's talk a little bit about the description of this creature, because it's unique. The story, I think, is kind of reminiscent of Mothman stories, the Chicago Mothman and also West Virginia Mothman, but the description of the creature is quite a bit different. It's still like a winged humanoid, and it's still kind of similar to Mothman, has like wide wingspan. It's described as being like 8 to 9 feet tall, leathery bat-like wings, which sometimes is how the Mothman is described, although sometimes they say it's like feathered, and apparently invulnerable to bullets. But based on descriptions, it actually almost looked more like a pterodactyl with like a horn, or sometimes they described it as like a beak protruding from its forehead, and that's what was emitting this beam of bright light.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have the outline open. I did drop
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I dropped like a illustration in there. And actually, Wizard drew this. This was, I believe, from the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
which is kind of
awesome.
cool. Yeah, so this
That
is
is awesome.
This is kind of
I
what,
want that on a T-shirt.
right? It'd be kind of cool.
Talk to Wizard.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, so you can see like it has a beak, but also like a horn protruding from his forehead.
Yeah,
and
that is sweet.
yeah, and
Yeah.
emits this bright light.
That's scary.
It's crazy that it
Right?
could do that.
Yeah, that is.
very odd. And then additionally, it apparently emitted like a terrible stench and made a, which, interesting. And it also made like a strange gargling noise, almost as though someone was being strangled, is how some people would describe it.
Ugh.
Also, according to the Des Moines Daily News, which reported on October 3rd, 1903, the noise was described as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for a battle. So
in a real newspaper, guys. Think about that.
Yeah. So,
come on, people.
So picture, imagine in your head what that would sound like. That is what
this is metal. Again,
right?
Another metal moment in Dairyland Frights. We had the dude on the elk or whatever
the kid, the demon child.
Yeah.
Flames.
Yeah. He's on fire, and now this metal.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, that was during the Patch to Go Fire episode. If you're curious to learn more about the demon child,
Patch to Go Fire episode. Check it out.
That's a great episode,
metal.
Guys. Tune
That's
into
great
that.
episode.
Yeah, that is spooky, but very 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 informative. So so that's a little bit about the creature that they're apparently seeing.
And this is just the Brooke. Sorry to interrupt you, but this is just the first 2 nights, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So they've. So let me just recap. So you got a guy seeing this thing jumping around and being like, "Why is that light moving?"
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another guy shooting wildly into the night.
It only gets worse.
Seeing this and that's just the first 2 nights.
Yes.
I can't wait
to hear about the third night.
Next.
Yes. Well, let me tell you, the third night. I was a little confused because some sources refer to this person as Clarence Dunn and some refer to it as Peter Dunn. So I'm just gonna say Clarence, I guess. So he, Mr. Dunn, we'll say, was a bank teller. And so he was hearing the stories from the other guys, and he was kind of fearing still, not really, I don't know if he had heard that Dr. Alcott had like seen a monster. So he was still kind of under the impression that this might be someone trying to scope out the bank and rob it. So he spent the following night in town at the bank to kind of keep an eye on things. So this night around 1 a.m. again, he was kind of dozing off in the bank. He had his shotgun beside him because he was just, again, this is
wild.
Just how things were. And he was awoken
after
dozing off by the sound of what he thought was someone being strangled.
Oh God,
no.
Right? And suddenly a bright light started shining into the bank. So he grabbed his shotgun and he shot at this light, which ended up he shot through one of the windows of the bank. So he actually shot out the front window of the bank. And I believe he saw the creature, and then the light disappeared. Whatever, it doesn't like to be shot at, even though it doesn't seem to be affected by bullets. And again, I kind of saw conflicting information about this. In one instance, I saw that he actually took a plaster cast of tracks that he had found outside the bank, which were described as like giant 3-toed tracks. But another source said that the police actually found the footprints and attempted to make a plaster cast, but were unsuccessful in creating the plaster cast. So I don't know if the plaster cast actually exists. Regardless, I don't think anyone has seen it. And maybe one day it'll show up somewhere in like an archive building. I don't know, but but yeah. But also, something I thought was interesting. If you recall, during the Chicago Mothman episode, I had actually talked about someone who had took a photo of strange tracks in the snow near a Mothman sighting, and they were also like large 3-toed tracks. They were like 20 inches long with like 2 toes at the front and then 1 at the back, which I thought was kind of interesting because that's kind of how it sounded like these tracks also looked. So just kind of interesting. But yeah, so then again, I am not 100% sure if this was the same night or the fourth night. I think it was the fourth night actually. Another person, O.V. White, was working at a hardware store, and that night he was sleeping in his quarters, which was above the store, when he was awoken by a strange gurgling noise outside the window. This creature's just like wandering around making
like gurgling it up.
It's gurgling outside windows.
It's in their mouth.
Yeah, he just isn't getting the picture. It's like he's getting shot at and he just keeps coming back.
I feel bad for him.
I know, right? So again, this guy, O.V. White, was awoken. He's freaking out. He's hearing this weird noise, so he grabs his shotgun. And he doesn't shoot at it yet. So he actually looks outside and he sees, like plain as day, this Van Meter visitor creature perched on top of a telephone pole. And he said that the creature, upon like seeing him, emitted a terrible stench, which nearly brought him like to his knees. So
it's so bad.
It smells so bad.
Oh boy.
So at that point, I guess he, really didn't like the smell. So at this point, he shoots at the creature. Poor guy. I know. And this actually, him shooting, awoke another nearby man, Sidney Gregg, who was actually a shopkeeper sleeping in his own store. Another thing too that I'm finding is like, do these guys ever just like sleep at home?
Do they?
No.
Yeah. What's going on?
I don't know. They're all just like,
that bad?
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, the wife. I gotta sleep in my store.
Yeah, or they were just like, maybe that was just a normal occurrence. Or I guess maybe they were so freaked out by the monster that they just wanted to be nearby. But yeah, so Sidney Gregg wakes up and he is like looking out the window, and what he sees is this monster. He describes it as like hopping like a kangaroo from like building to building and like pole to light pole. So also a high school teacher also woke up and saw the monster in the area. Started shooting wildly. No, she did not start shooting, but she described it as it was interesting. I had never really like heard this word, but she described it as antediluvian, which is like apparently pre-flood. So like olden times,
like ancient.
Like ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of another interesting way to describe it. Which also, again, kind of reminds me of the Chicago Mothman story, because some people who were seeing it were describing it looking almost like a gargoyle and like perching on top of buildings,
right?
Which kind of similar,
right?
Although I don't remember any of those stories talking about a beam of light emitting from its head. But
yeah, and the other big difference is people are not shooting wildly at these things.
That's true. Right. Yeah.
Like Chicago Mothman. Imagine everybody started shooting.
Yeah. No, that's true. I don't remember any. Yeah, right.
No.
I don't remember any stories of people shooting at the Chicago Mothman. So I guess maybe we've learned,
I hope.
Yeah. But something actually interesting that Chad Lewis mentioned is that like these people who were seeing this creature were not like the town drunks. They were actually like pretty prominent people. He said that all these people were just like really shocked. They were really respected and important people in town. They were businessmen, bankers, shop owners, teachers. He was shocked that like any of them would put their names on this story unless they really truly believed it. Just because they had like reputations to uphold. They weren't just going to be wildly saying like, oh, I saw a pterodactyl with a beam of light coming out of its head, just like for fun.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so very interesting. So let's talk about, I believe this is the fifth night, the visitors vanquishing. So
they're getting sick of it.
Yeah, at this point, many people in the town have seen this monster. They're sick of it. It's freaking them out. It's, everyone's on edge. Apparently they're just toting shotguns around for fun. So they were sick of this monster. And I would love to be part of one of these someday, but essentially a bunch of the boys got together and they charged to the west side of Van Meter, where a man named J.L. Platt had heard strange noises coming from a nearby abandoned coal mine. So they believe that this is where the monster was kind of hanging out when he wasn't, terrorizing the city. So everyone goes over there. And apparently the monster was there at the mine, but he was actually joined by a second smaller version of the monster. So there were two of them,
Oh,
which is
Mm.
interesting.
wow.
Plot twist.
Yeah.
Plot twist.
So I don't know what the second monster was, if it was like his wife or his child or something.
Aw, a whole family.
But
Girlfriend.
right. But they got freaked out by everyone showing up, and they actually like flew away into the night. But the next morning, I don't know if like the guys left and then came back, or they just stayed there the whole night, but the monsters eventually did return, and the men had gathered to rid the earth of them, according to news stories, with their combined firepower, even though, you know, they were apparently immune to gunshots, but they were ready to start blasting these guys. So
Can you
so,
imagine?
Oh my
God.
I know, right? So another quote from that 1903 article, which was also very fun. I just love how they wrote back in the day. They said the reception they received, meaning the monsters, the reception they received would have sunk the Spanish fleet. But aside from unearthly noise and peculiar odor, they did not seem to mind it, but slowly descended the shaft of the old mine. So they were just kind of like, whatever. Then they decided to go into the mine willingly, apparently. And then they were never seen again. So this mine, I read it again in a couple different articles. So in one article, it said that they chased the Van Meter visitors down the mine, and then they blew up the entrance so they couldn't escape. But separately, it said that the creatures just seemed to go down there on their own, and then they like calmly buried the entrance so that they couldn't escape. So in either case, the monsters ended up down there, and they covered up the entrance so they couldn't get back out. And this mine is actually confirmed to exist on the farm of a man named John Youngman, and is still currently covered up. So I was watching like a YouTube video, and they did like find this mine, and the guy who owned the farm was like, yeah, we think that maybe the Van Meter visitors are still down there. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah, poor guy and his wife or whatever. So that was the end of that then. Nobody, I guess, saw the visitor after that. Well, there's a couple more recent stories. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that seemed to be the end. Yeah.
Brooke, before you get to theories, how is this different from our first episode, the Hodag?
Right.
Like, where would you, I guess, we kind of, if you listen to our first episode, you'll find that we thought it was kind of, I don't know, scammy.
Oh, it's definitely scammy.
So why do you think this one is a little more believable than the Hodag?
Well,
do you have any off the top of your head?
Well, the Hodag was kind of confirmed to be a hoax because the guy, because he was like creating like this like fake Hodag out of like leather and like wire and stuff. But it was kind of similar in that they had like an old fashioned mob go after the Hodag as well. But I believe in that case, all the guys who went out there were like all in on the joke.
Okay.
And because they like took a picture of it. They had like a picture with the Hodag's like charred body, and they all had like their guns and pitchforks and were posing with it and stuff. And so it is similar though. Like it's possible, I think, that all these guys were in on it. And I will talk about that in a little bit. Like they apparently all these guys like kind of knew each other and were friends. So I think that is honestly a possibility. I think like, I don't know. It's a little bit more interesting, I guess, because it seemed to kind of like leak outside of that. Like the teacher like kind of saw it and like all this other stuff. And but there are a lot of parallels, I think. And it is like the same time of like the time of, I think like 1903 is when this happened. And I think the Hodag was in like, the 1890s. Yeah. So kind of a similar time frame.
Yeah.
So
I just before you get to theories, just imagine this. You're both in your little small town, you're sleeping in your beds, and then all of a sudden you hear this.
Nobody slept that week, I guess.
Nobody slept that week. Thank you.
Yeah, Megan. This poor town.
All right. All right. So let's get to theories. I love these theories.
Yeah, that's some fun theories here. So theory number one, this is like always the number one theory when it comes to these winged humanoids, is that, oh, it was a large bird or a bat.
Shocker.
Right?
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Honestly. And the bat theory is kind of particularly dumb because the largest species of bat that's actually native to Iowa only grows to be about 13 inches wide. So
I don't
probably
think
wasn't
so.
a bat. Yeah, I don't think people.
Hey, Megan, I'm sorry, really quick to interrupt again, but you had that episode about the bat and the thing going through the sheriff's window.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that creature.
Yeah, and I don't think that was explained at all either. So
Yeah, that was
No.
like the man bat of lacrosse, right? I think
I believe
that's what,
so.
Yeah.
Lacrosse, right?
Man
Yeah.
bat.
That was in our
Yeah.
I think it was just like interesting cryptids of the Midwest episode or
Correct.
whatever it was called. But yeah, that was also interesting. I think that it's interesting how many man bats seem to be flying around.
Right, that's what I'm saying. What's with the man
what
bat?
is with the man bats? That's another thing I guess too that differs from the hodag. The hodag was such a like unique and odd creature that they just made up.
Correct.
There was like, oh, it has the
Correct.
face of a bulldog and it has a spiked tail and it only eats white dogs on Sundays or whatever.
Right,
Whereas
exactly. It's like this weird, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas these man bat creatures seem to just be like flying around everywhere and everyone's seeing them.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I don't think anyone's gonna see a 13-inch bat and think that it's a 8-foot tall winged pterodactyl.
Yeah, and this
beast.
thing was like terrifying people. So it
Yeah,
must have been
this
pretty
was-
huge. Like, why would you be shooting at a small 13-inch bat?
Yes,
You know?
exactly. And then others have hypothesized that it could have been a turkey vulture, or a sandhill crane. Once again,
No,
that's
I don't believe that either.
I
Those
know
are not that big.
Crane Slayer says
right?
no.
Yes, that again, Mothman. Like that's what people were saying for the West Virginia Mothman. Like, oh, it was a sandhill crane.
No.
No.
To be fair,
Absolutely
like
not.
as a comparison, turkey vultures can get very large. So they can have a wingspan of up to 6 feet, actually. However, if you can believe it, they do not have a horn on their head that emits light. So,
darn.
No.
That's a little bit different. And sandhill cranes are actually not normally seen in Iowa. We have tons of them in Wisconsin. But so I guess like if someone saw a sandhill crane, they might be a little bit freaked out because they don't normally see it. But again, it does not match the description at all.
No.
Seems like everyone wants to blame cranes for everything, but we love our sandhill
Blame the
cranes.
cranes.
Can't get a
Right?
break.
Yeah.
Cranes
They do
cannot get
make
a-
weird noises, though, I will say. I
Hell
wouldn't
yeah.
describe it as like a choking gargling, but it's definitely weird.
No, it's
Like
It's
Satan
come around
and imps and such.
Yeah, right.
I will do you both a favor. I have cranes all over the place. It's a crane crazy country. I will go. I will go. These cranes are, and I record it,
Yeah.
and then I'll play it live. It's shit.
It is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Not like
that'd be
anything
awesome.
else. Yeah.
Yeah. Another theory that is kind of like I think a funny, like fun theory, but I don't really buy it. But so apparently electricity had recently been introduced to the town of Van Meter. So some people were saying that they think that the people may have not been used to seeing shadows around the town at night, and that maybe it was like the
I love
shadow of
this.
a bat or a bird or something.
I love-
Yeah, which again I think is dumb because like
It's
they're not idiots. Like they still were using lanterns and stuff to see before they had electricity. So
Right.
they understand the concept of shadows, I'm sure.
Correct.
It's not like they're so I thought that was kind of stupid, but I thought it was kind of funny that like, oh, electricity had been recently introduced. Like maybe something weird happened. Maybe electricity drew the Van Meter visitor to the town. Who knows?
That could be.
Yeah.
There you go.
Another thing, so like I mentioned at the beginning, the population of Van Meter had dropped 12% in 1900 compared to 1890. So one theory I heard from like a YouTuber that I was watching is that this could have been like a ploy to draw attention to the town and increase tourism since the residents had dropped. I don't necessarily believe this though, because like at this point in time, why would anyone assume that a story about a winged demon monster would make people want to move to the town? Like maybe today, but
Right.
like back in the day, I feel like that would make more people want to like leave and not go there, but maybe that's just me. But at the same time, like the Hodag story was kind of a ploy, but again, that was more of like a fun, quirky, like weird story, whereas this is more like terrifying. Like, who wants to live in a town where there's a winged beast and people shooting at it all the time? Yeah.
Too stressful now.
There were some like somewhat similar hoaxes going on around the US at the time, and I don't know how well known these were, like if these were being reported nationally, but I guess in New York there was a story about a man who found the skeleton of a giant, and then they found out that that obviously it was a fake. It was not a real giant. And then in Texas there were stories about like winged lizards and dragons flying around that also ended up being like a hoax, and this was all like around the same time. So leads to the other thing is that maybe it was just a hoax. So a lot of these guys who I mentioned, like UG Griffith specifically, and OV White and Sidney Gregg, the store owners, they were all kind of buddies, and they were known as the Bachelors of Van Meter, them and like a few other guys. So they, you know, we do know that people liked playing pranks and jokes even back then. Again, listen to the Hodag episode and learn more about the antics of Gene Shepard. It's a good time.
Yes.
But like maybe these guys were like in on it and just wanted to like prank the whole town and just have a little bit of fun. Again, one of them was like a doctor. I don't like, I don't really like see that happening, but I guess it could be. And then also I put in a picture here, which again, we can share on Instagram, but this shows some of the guys who were involved. So in the bottom row, the second guy is UG Griffith. That was the first guy who saw the monster.
Yeah.
And then in the top row, the first and the third guy are Ovi White and Sidney Gregg, the two of the shop owners who saw the monster on the fourth night, I believe. So, so they were all buddies, and apparently the Bachelors of Van Meter, so they like to have fun.
Good for them.
Yeah. And also, like, since people who outside of this group saw it, again, like the teacher, like the doctor who's not in this picture, it can't have just been someone like dressed up in costume, because unless literally everyone was in on it, because this person would have been shot at many times, which totally wouldn't be great.
Hey, George, it's like, me. Stop
shooting. What a funny joke.
Right? Exactly.
William, stop shooting.
That's how they sound down there.
I can see it. Voice.
Yeah, that's how I would perceive it. So this, I just thought this quote was kind of interesting. This was a quote from Matthew Sharps, a professor of psychology at UC Fresno. He said, the story, and he kind of is talking more generally, the story becomes part of the memory. Obviously, these things aren't real, but people really do see them. So they behave towards them as though they are real. They are eyewitness memory errors. So he said that people with tendencies toward depression, ADHD, or disassociation are more prone to see things like UFOs, cryptids, that sort of thing, according to his research.
Interesting.
And he said it can be a life-changing experience. They go around telling people and they think that you're crazy. So now I've got to prove Bigfoot is there. Now I'm driving around with American Bigfoot Project printed on my van and telling my wife I'll be done as soon as I find Bigfoot. That quote made me laugh as well. But, you know, I'm just gonna say I have ADHD and I've never seen a winged humanoid flying monster. Sometimes some of this, you know, he does research. I'm sure his research is you know, valid and everything, but it's, you know, it's just interesting. You know, maybe it is everyone just seeing something, but
Brooke,
there's still time
for now. Yes, there's still time, Brooke.
That's true.
Knock on wood.
Remember topas or whatever you want to say.
That is true. Tulpas, yeah. Fingers crossed that I don't see one tonight.
You will. I got a costume. I'm going outside your window.
Oh my gosh. That would freak me out, John. Don't do that.
Too late.
So I guess after hearing some of these theories, what do you guys think? Do you think this was like a real thing that happened? Megan, what's your take?
Part of me feels like if this was like an elaborate hoax or a prank, they took it too far with like shooting guns every night. Like,
right.
Like they're like, oh, ha, ha, this is gonna be so funny. Let's like shoot off a whole bunch of, you know, bullets every night. It's like, okay, that's a little bit too far. So in my mind, it's like I feel like something must have had to actually scare them enough that they would be terrified enough to grab their shotguns and
Right.
go after it. But maybe it was kind of like, oh, everyone's playing into this hysteria, and that's kind of what brought the mob together. So maybe it was just something that like kind of built upon itself into something that didn't really need to happen. So part of me
Yeah.
feels like there's still a mystery there. I'm not convinced it was like a total planned hoax.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's a really good point because yeah, there was a lot of gun shooting and like it wasn't just like people were making up that there was gun shooting. The police were finding like bullet casings everywhere. So people were really out there shooting guns,
In
wildly,
the
but
streets.
yeah, in the streets of the city. John, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually reading about mob mentality, and that kind of happens a lot with people. There's been numerous stories, true stories, where people have said, like, hey, there's this person or whatever, or a creature, and then everybody gets together and they just incite each other, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like this mob mentality.
For sure.
And that's what I think would happen. I think
Mhm.
the creature, though, is fascinating to me because, like you said, it has had another creature with it. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but I'm not really sure what this was. A lot of bats around Spring Green. So when you go outside in the summertime, you'll be dive bombed by these little
Mm-hmm.
bats eating mosquitoes, which I don't mind. Like, eat the damn
Yeah,
mosquitoes. But they're about the
please eat
size of my
mosquitoes.
hand, or a
Yeah.
man's hand, a regular man's hand. So it's not like I would start shooting at it. Um, so
Right.
I think it was just the mob mentality and then some type of creature, which I can't say it's a hoax, but I also say maybe it's a different type of creature. Because
Yeah.
Totally.
remember too, we have unfortunately killed a lot of creatures in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Go on a website and you'll see all these creatures that used to exist just like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And now we killed them
Mm-hmm.
because we're
Yep.
idiots. So I don't know
Yep.
what to say. I think it's part hoax, part mob mentality, and part a creature that everybody went like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And
Like, let's kill it.
yeah, let's
Ugh.
kill it. That's the first thing
I
you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is like the way that you were describing how this thing looks, it sounds like it would be really hard to replicate in a
Right.
costume.
Correct.
Right.
Like with a
Yeah.
big wingspan and like a pointy
Yes.
beak and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
light coming from its head. Like that would be like a very, very
Yeah,
elaborate
that's a lot of work.
costume.
For sure. Yeah. It's
It's
not
a lot of
as
work.
easy as just putting on like a monkey suit and being like, I'm Bigfoot or something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I feel like I don't know what to believe either. I feel like
Mm,
people were definitely seeing something,
right.
but I don't know.
What was it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something to say about like the collective conscious kind of like Topol is kind
Correct.
of like
Yep.
manifesting something.
Absolutely.
And when you're hearing from everyone else that they're seeing like a winged beast with a
Mm-hmm.
big light beam coming from its head, you're just kind of
Right.
more predisposed to also see that, even if
Right.
it's not that.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but that's interesting. So today though, as usually happens in these circumstances, there is a festival of the Van Meter Visitor
Yep.
Festival in Van Meter, Iowa. So every September, they commemorate the sightings because they happen in September and October. So Rachel Backstrom is a member of the festival organizing committee. She said in an interview, the festival usually brings in somewhere between 300 to 500 people. The legend seems to get more popular every year, and I think we will have a nice turnout this year. It is probably one of the bigger tourist events for Van Meter, but Van Meter doesn't have a huge tourism industry.
Shocker.
Right,
Right.
the Iowa Veterans Cemetery is probably the town's biggest draw. So, looks
Yeah.
like the next one this year is going to be on September 30th of 2023. So, if we're in the Iowa area, it'd be kind of fun to check it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Also, a bit of interesting backstory too. So Chad Lewis, we've mentioned quite a few episodes. We talk about him, and he was actually the one who kind of unearthed the story about the Van Meter visitor. So people were like kind of familiar with it, but he kind of found like all the old news articles, and then they wrote the book about it. And he's the one that actually gave this creature his name. So he said he purposely chose something that was non-threatening because we have no reason to believe that this being didn't come in peace. Did not seem to be attacking anyone. It was being attacked. But he seemed to like be a pretty friendly, well, maybe not friendly, but didn't seem to be like trying to kill anyone or hurt anyone. So he named it the visitor instead of the monster.
Oh, nice.
That was nice of him.
Yeah, I know. I was like, yeah, that's fair. Like I'm on the visitor's side personally.
I agree.
But, and then some other interesting things. So there were further sightings, other strange happenings. So reportedly, someone in the 1980s who had just moved to Van Meter and had not known about the visitor's story was walking by an old coal mine, and like the old coal mine, I should say, and he saw a giant winged bat-like creature fly overhead.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
maybe the Van Meter visitor got out. I don't know.
That could be.
And then in the 2000s, a different man and his family were driving near Van Meter when they saw a giant black winged creature laying. They had thought it was dead by the side of the road, and then when they drove back to check it out, the creature was gone. And Lewis learned that there's a lot of strange stories around Van Meter, from ghosts in the local high school and the basement of a local bar to sea serpents in the Raccoon River. So, you know, maybe Van Meter's just kind of like a hot spot for paranormal activity.
For sure. Or people just have wild imaginations.
Yeah, right?
It's like an X-Files episode, right?
For sure. Yeah. It's very interesting. But I do believe, though, that certain like cities just have a interesting, unique vibe to them for sure. So yeah, it'd be kind of cool to visit it. But and then, like I mentioned at the beginning, Chad Lewis, along with Kevin Nelson and Noah Voss, they wrote that book, The Van Meter Visitor, A True and Mysterious Encounter with the Unknown. It was published in 2013. And in the book, Lewis wrote, I can honestly say that after poring over countless records, interviewing residents, unearthing local history, and touring the sites of the original encounters, I'm still as puzzled today as the people of Van Meter were back in 1903. So, very interesting. Also, I love these quotes from Lewis in addition. This was, I think he did an interview with the Daily Yonder, if I am remembering correctly. But I just really like these quotes. So he said, in today's world where we crave answers to everything and increasingly disregard gray areas in pursuit of black and white certainties, the space for mystery and the unexplained is perpetually shrinking. And he also said, I have found peace in knowing that I may never know what happened in Van Meter during that fateful week in 1903, and perhaps I am not meant to. Perhaps the answer is not nearly as important as the act of seeking it out. Which I was like, I like that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. It's like, I think that's cool. It's fun to talk about and research and learn about these things, but maybe we don't necessarily need an answer.
Better not to know the truth sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess let us know what you think. What do you guys think, listeners? Was the Van Meter visitor a flesh and blood monster, a paranormal phenomena, or simply a trick of the eye during a technological turning point in Van Meter's history? Send us an email at dairylandfrights@gmail.com with your story, where we would love to hear it. And if you're interested in stories like this, be sure to check out our past cryptid episodes, especially, like we mentioned, the Chicago Mothman episode. That's episode 10. Episode 1, the Hodag, if you're more interested in the hoax, fun, goofy side of it. Episode 6, the cryptids and legends of the Midwest. Megan talks about the man bat of La Crosse in that episode, so that is also kind of similar. But yeah, we talk a lot about cryptids. They're my favorite, so a lot of good stories.
Yes, and this one was another great story. I want to say again, I plead to people, if you don't know what something is out there, just don't start shooting.
Let that not be your first instinct.
Please let not. You stop, people. All right? Stop it.
Just stop.
No, that was really interesting, because this is the first story that was like everybody's shooting at it and everything, and then everybody's kind of like, we don't really know what that was.
Maybe we should stop and think about it.
And it's not like the Chicago Mothman, the Virginia one, I should say, which we haven't covered yet, but we will, that destroyed a bridge and killed 47 people.
Right.
I think, I mean, so this isn't, it's just kind of flying around, jumping around, hey, like a playful little animal. and guys
Yeah.
are shooting at it, and I don't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's really weird, right? So please don't do that.
Agreed.
So, we are going to stay. I did the Bachelor's Grove. That was our fun little episode because we had a little technology problem. But I'm going back to Illinois again for our next episode,
Nice.
ladies. And we are covering a zoo, right?
Okay.
The Lincoln Park Zoo. And the Lincoln Park Zoo, you'll love this, has anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 bones buried underneath the park to this day.
That's crazy.
Okay, I need to know this story, John.
Yeah.
Sounds very intriguing.
The graves are still there underneath, and they are still finding graves to this day when they do renovations at the park.
Right.
So I am truly excited about this. You guys are going to love this because we've all been to the zoo, whether we've been kids or taking our, like, whoever, right? It's a fun place to go. Maybe not this zoo.
They're
So,
like, what should we do with this land? How about a zoo for children?
Yes. So it's really exciting. I'll explain more. If you're from Illinois, you are definitely familiar with this. So wrapping up, Megan, anything more to add about the monster? Or a monster, I'm sorry, visitor.
The visitor, John.
Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah, don't mislabel him. He was just trying to live his life.
Uh-huh.
With his wife.
Yeah, with his wife. Yeah.
Right,
They're just trying to start a family in their little coal mine.
Exactly.
And, trying to beat the neighbors. But
yeah. Can you imagine they just move into the town? They're like, we should go check out, the local area. And then people like shooting at him.
Just dealing with
so
life.
Sad.
Right. So again, don't shoot at visitors or monsters or people for that matter.
Yes.
And again, say hi, not only to your ghost from us, but say hi to the Van Meter visitor.
Visitor.
And don't be a mom. So great episode again. I love it. I look forward to sharing the zoo story episode with both of you. You'll get a real kick out of it. So stay spooky until next time.